Chapter 1. The crystal goblet fractured against the sacred white marble, a deafening crack in the absolute silence. Copper flooded my tongue. It was the distinct metallic tang of my own blood. I stood alone at the highest peak of the Pantheon. The glacial wind whipped my thin silken gown against my bruised skin. My bare feet felt like they were freezing to the stone floor. Theron, the god-wolf of light, took a deliberate step backward. His golden armor caught the sunlight, blinding and cruel. He raised a perfectly manicured hand and wiped a single drop of my blood from his flawless jaw. His skin remained completely unmarked. He had refused the ceremonial bite. The mating ritual was broken. A melodic, vicious laugh echoed from the shadow of the colossal pillars. Phaedra, the nine-tailed illusionist, stepped into the light. She moved with predatory grace, walking directly into Theron's open arms. He embraced her without hesitation. He buried his face in her fiery crimson hair. Thousands of divine deities and high-ranking wolves watched from the amphitheater below. Their collective stare was a suffocating, crushing weight. I was a half-blood, a despised hybrid of wolf and god. For decades I had played the quiet, obedient demigoddess, burying the true nature of my soul deep within. But this was a public execution of my pride. "Look at her," Phaedra purred. Her voice was amplified by magic, carrying to the furthest rows. "A defective breed, a stain on this holy ground." Theron's eyes flared with golden malice. "She is unworthy of the light. Toss her to the void. Let the sacrificial pit consume her taint." Two armored guards stepped forward, their spears lowered. I backed away. My toes grazed the edge of the endless, swirling abyss below the temple. The wind shrieked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I closed my eyes. Then the heavens tore open. It was not a storm. The fabric of reality simply ripped apart. A jagged fissure of pure, suffocating darkness split the golden sky. Black lightning violently struck the altar. The explosive shock wave threw the advancing guards off their feet. An overwhelming scent flooded the arena. Wild snow pine, wet, freshly turned earth, raw, crackling ozone. It completely obliterated the cloying, sweet incense of the gods. Out of the swirling black smoke stepped a living nightmare, Vander, the Dark Lycan King of the Abyss. He was the ancient, sworn enemy of the Pantheon. He wore armor of blackened steel over a towering, imposing frame. A cloak woven from actual shadows billowed behind him. His presence carried an absolute, oppressive gravity. Every god and wolf in the arena froze in pure, unadulterated terror. He did not just walk. He conquered the space with every single stride. Theron snarled, his fangs descending. "How dare you defile this?" Vander moved faster than a blink. He crossed the altar in a blur of terrifying speed. His large, leather-clad hand clamped around Theron's throat. He lifted the god-wolf off the ground. Like a helpless pup, Phaedra shrieked and lunged, her magic flaring. Vander did not even glance at her. A negligent flick of his wrist sent a shockwave of dark energy outward. Phaedra was hurled backward, crumpling against a stone column with a sickening thud. Vander tossed Theron aside. The golden god crashed into the sacrificial braziers. Sparks rained over the marble. Then the Dark King turned his gaze to me. His eyes were bottomless obsidian, ringed with a terrifying feral crimson light. The alpha aura radiating from him was intensely physical. It pressed heavily against my skin. The hidden wolf deep inside my soul whined, instantly submitting to his sheer power. Yet I did not run. I was rooted to the spot. As he closed the distance between us, the glacial cold in my veins thawed. He stopped mere inches away. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle jumped beneath his scarred skin. He looked down at my fragile, trembling form. Without a single word, he drew a silver dagger from his belt. He sliced the blade deeply across his own palm. Thick, dark blood welled to the surface, thrumming with ancient power. He cupped the back of my neck with his clean hand. His fingers were surprisingly warm, sending a jolt of electricity straight down my spine. He pressed his bleeding palm against my lips. "Drink," he commanded. The word was a low, gravelly vibration. It bypassed my ears and echoed directly inside my mind. I opened my mouth. His blood touched my tongue. It tasted of fire and raw, untamed magic. As I swallowed, a searing heat erupted in my chest, binding our souls with an invisible, unbreakable chain. Vander turned his broad shoulders to face the stunned Pantheon. "She is no longer your trash," he roared. His voice shattered the remaining crystal goblets on the altar. "From this very second, she is the blood queen of the abyss." Thank you for diving into the shadows with us. If you felt the undeniable pull of Vander and Calliope's dark bond, make sure to subscribe to Elysian Ink Stories. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a moment. The carriage ride into the abyss is about to begin. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Chapter 2. The carriage jerked violently, launching me forward. I braced for the hard impact of the floorboards, but instead I crashed into a wall of solid muscle and blackened steel armor. Large, unyielding hands gripped my waist, steadying me in an instant. The touch sent a violent electric shock through my entire nervous system. "Careful," Vander murmured. His voice was a low, gravelly vibration that settled deep in my bones. He released me the second I found my footing. He sank into the velvet bench opposite mine. The spectral steeds pulling us tore through the night sky, dragging the obsidian carriage far away from the Pantheon. The cabin was impossibly small. It was designed for a king, not a king and his stolen bride. Vander's massive frame consumed the space. His knees nearly brushed mine. I pressed my back into the dark velvet corner, shivering uncontrollably. My silken gown was torn, offering no protection against the freezing altitude. He noticed the shiver. A tense muscle feathered along his jawline. "Hold still," he commanded. The harshness in his tone was gone. It was not a threat, but a directive. He leaned forward and wrapped his large, calloused hand around my bruised ankle. I flinched, but he didn't tighten his grip. Heat radiated from his palm, seeping deep into my frozen skin. Dark, soothing magic flowed from his fingertips, instantly knitting the damaged tissue I hadn't even realized was throbbing. He didn't look at my face. He stared intensely at my foot. The scent of crushed pine needles, damp earth, and raw ozone was intoxicating in the enclosed cabin. It filled my lungs, completely crowding out my panic. Look at the big bad beast playing nursemaid. A harsh, clicking sound broke the heavy silence. I gasped, jerking my leg back. Perched on the brass window railing was a nightmare. A raven, but entirely wrong. It possessed the sleek, heavily muscled shoulders of a wolf and 3 gleaming, intelligent amber eyes. "Silence, Barnaby," Vander growled. The air pressure in the cabin dropped instantly. The creature, Barnaby, clicked his beak, completely unfazed by the lethal alpha aura. "I am merely making an observation, your brutality. You spent a century staring into that wretched scrying orb, practically drooling over this little bird. Now you finally steal her, and you can't even look her in the eye. Pathetic." My breath hitched. A century? A scrying orb? A dark flush crept up Vander's thick neck. It was a stark, jarring contrast to his terrifying reputation. He lunged, his hand snapping toward the bird with lethal speed. Barnaby squawked, fluttering upward and dropping a heavy gold coin onto the floorboards. It rolled to my feet. It was a temple coin. "You watched me?" My voice was barely a whisper. Vander's hand dropped. His obsidian eyes finally met mine. The feral red rings around his pupils flared with suppressed emotion. "The beast speaks lies to entertain himself. You are a weapon against Theron, nothing more." His words were solid ice, but his thumb, still resting just above my ankle, betrayed him. It stroked a slow, unconscious circle against my bare skin. The friction sent a wicked jolt of heat straight to my core. The sexual tension between us was a living, breathing entity. It coiled tight, suffocating, and electric. Why would the most feared creature in the realms risk a holy war for a broken half-blood? I opened my mouth to demand the truth. Then the carriage roof screamed. Reinforced metal peeled back with a deafening shriek. The icy wind of the upper atmosphere blasted into the cabin. 3 figures dropped through the ragged hole. Wolf assassins, Theron's elite guard. Their silver blades gleamed with a sickly, glowing green venom. "Protect her," Vander roared. The confined space exploded into chaos. Barnaby transformed into a flurry of razor-sharp feathers and snapping fangs, blinding the nearest attacker. Vander moved with devastating brutality. He caught an assassin by the throat, crushing windpipe and bone in a single sickening crunch. He hurled the lifeless body out the shattered roof, but the third assassin was not aiming for Vander. He raised a specialized hand-held crossbow. The bolt was aimed directly at my chest. The trigger snapped. No! Vander didn't hesitate. He didn't attempt to use his dark magic. He used his body. He twisted, throwing his immense bulk over me. He pinned me flat against the velvet seat, burying my face in the crook of his neck to shield me from the splintering wood. The violent thud of the impact shuddered through his entire frame. A deafening feral roar of pure agony ripped from his throat. The assassin scrambled backward, diving out of the moving carriage into the black sky. Vander's oppressive aura flickered wildly. Then it died completely. His dead weight collapsed onto me, driving the breath from my lungs. His head lolled heavily into the hollow of my shoulder. I touched his back in blind panic. My trembling fingers came away, slick, warm, and coated in a glowing green substance. He closed his eyes, and the Dark King stopped moving. Chapter 3. The iron gates of the abyssal fortress groaned open. They scraped against the stone courtyard like screaming souls. Thick, unnatural fog swallowed the carriage the moment the spectral steed slammed to a halt. I stumbled out, my knees trembling, my hands slick with Vander's poisoned blood. "Guards, fetch the healers!" Barnaby shrieked from above. He was no longer a mocking observer. The Raven Wolf circled frantically, his 3 amber eyes glowing with genuine panic. A dozen Lycan warriors poured from the obsidian shadows. Their eyes widened at the sight of their invincible king slumped across the velvet seats. They hauled his immense, leaden weight out of the cabin. I followed, my bare feet bleeding against the jagged cobblestones. We rushed through winding torchlit corridors until we reached the royal bedchamber. They dropped him onto a colossal 4-poster bed. "Leave us," I ordered. The command ripped from my throat, surprising even me with its absolute authority. The guards hesitated, their eyes darting between me and their dying alpha. "Out!" Barnaby squawked, diving at their heads. "Do as the Queen says." The heavy oak doors slammed shut. We were alone. I scrambled onto the mattress. The glowing green toxin was rapidly turning the veins in his neck a sickening pitch-black hue. I grasped the wooden shaft of the crossbow bolt. I had to get it out. I took a sharp breath, planted my hands against his hardened chest, and yanked. The bolt came free with a wet squelch. Dark blood spurted from his shoulder. I pressed both hands over the wound, desperately trying to summon the suppressed divine light inside me. I needed to heal him. He had taken this strike for me, a useless, defective half-blood. Suddenly the mattress violently shifted. Large hands clamped around my wrists like iron shackles. I gasped as the world flipped. In a fraction of a second, I was flat on my back. Vander loomed over me. His chest heaved. The blackened veins pulsed fiercely against his throat. But it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins. The obsidian depths were completely gone. They were glowing, feral red. The neurotoxin had bypassed his logic. It had stripped away the stoic king, leaving only the primal, unrestrained alpha. A guttural snarl vibrated in his chest, so deep it rattled my teeth. His powerful thighs locked around my hips, rendering me completely immobile. He leaned down. His fangs were fully descended, dripping with venom-laced saliva. He was going to tear out my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I waited for the fatal bite. It never came. Instead, a rough, hot exhale hit my collarbone. The feral alpha didn't bite. He buried his face in the crook of my neck. He inhaled deeply, drawing my scent straight into his lungs. A soft, broken groan vibrated against my skin. The toxic haze demanded violence, but his soul demanded comfort. His iron grip on my wrists slowly loosened, melting into a desperate, clinging hold. The terrifying beast of the abyss simply curled into my embrace like a wounded animal. Cautiously, I freed my hands. I wrapped my arms around his broad, trembling shoulders. I stroked his dark hair. The sheer heat radiating from his skin slowly cooled. His breathing evened out. He slipped into a deep, healing slumber. When dawn broke, the fog outside the arched windows turned a bruised gray. I woke up alone in the center of the bed. I sat up, pulling the dark silk sheets tightly to my chest. Vander stood by the balcony. He was fully dressed in fresh, dark leather. The wound on his shoulder was completely gone, erased by his cellular regeneration. He stared out into the mist, his broad back completely rigid. "I apologize for my feral state," he said gruffly. The icy detachment was back in his voice. He refused to turn around. "You didn't hurt me," I replied softly. He finally faced me. His expression was a flawless mask of stone. "Theron is rallying the entire Pantheon. He sent word through the realms. He claims I kidnapped you to drain your divine blood. He will use this as an excuse to eradicate my kind." Panic flared in my chest. "Then let me go back. I can tell them the truth." "No." The word was absolute. It brokered no argument. He stepped closer, his intense gaze locking onto mine. "They will execute you the moment you step foot on holy ground. There is only one way to stop a holy war, a sacred law even the supreme gods cannot defy." He paused, a muscle feathering in his jaw. "The law of the fated mate." I stopped breathing. "We must convince the supreme divine court that we are destined," Vander continued, his voice dropping an octave. "A fake mating. You play the part of my devoted queen. In return, I will shield you from Theron's wrath. For eternity." The magnetic pull between us flared, sharp and undeniable. I craved his warmth. I desired the terrifying safety of his shadow. I slowly nodded. "I accept the deal." Before he could respond, a blinding, searing flash of white light erupted in the center of the room. The temperature dropped to freezing. A scroll made of floating blood-red runes materialized in the air. Barnaby fluttered frantically through the window, crashing into a stone pillar in his haste. "The court," the raven shrieked. "The Supreme Court has answered." Vander read the floating runes. All the color drained from his face. His obsidian eyes darkened with pure dread. "They demand proof," Vander whispered, staring at the magical decree. "We are summoned to the death arena, to face the soul trial. If we fail to prove our bond—" He looked at me, his fists clenching at his sides. "They will burn you alive." Chapter 4. The death arena rose like a colossal monument of judgment. Obsidian walls, bone-carved pillars. Thousands of immortal eyes watched from every possible direction. I could feel their collective stare pressing into my skin, waiting, judging, desperately hoping I would fail. I tightened my grip on Vander's hand. His long fingers closed around mine instantly. It was a firm, grounding touch that anchored me to the earth. "Do not look at them," Vander murmured, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Look at me." I tried, but my chest felt entirely too tight, because this was not real. This was a desperate lie to save our lives, a fabricated performance for a bloodthirsty crowd. So why did it feel like the only truth I possessed? "The first trial," the Supreme Judge declared, his voice booming like thunder. "The dance of shadows." The music began. It was a slow, haunting melody that pulsed through the frigid air like a second heartbeat. Vander pulled me flush against his imposing frame. There was absolutely no space between us. His calloused hand settled low on my spine. The blistering heat of his palm seeped through my thin silken gown, pressing me closer to his rigid muscles. We moved across the white sand. Or perhaps he moved, and my body simply followed his silent command. My fingers curled into his dark hair without a single conscious thought. My breath hitched every time his muscular thighs brushed against mine. The scent of wild snow pine and crackling ozone completely surrounded me. "You are shaking," he said quietly. "I am terrified," I admitted. I was not afraid of the towering arena. I was not afraid of death. I was afraid of this dangerous, undeniable gravity pulling me toward the Dark King. "The seal of breath," the judge commanded. The entire Colosseum fell dead silent. Vander lifted my face with both of his hands, his obsidian eyes locked onto mine, completely unguarded. "If this is a lie," I whispered, my voice trembling against his lips, "why does it feel like the only truth I've ever known?" Something profound and dangerous flickered across his dark expression. Then he kissed me. It was not controlled. It was not careful. It was entirely overwhelming. His mouth claimed mine like he had been starving for a century. His hand tightened at the back of my neck, deepening the kiss, pulling my soul directly into his. I melted against his chest. A soft, involuntary sound escaped my throat. He swallowed the whimper, holding me tighter, as if letting me go would kill him. This was not a performance anymore, and that terrified me more than anything else in the realms. "Enough!" Theron's furious roar shattered the intimate moment. Reality came crashing back like a falling blade. "The final trial," Theron bellowed from the gilded balcony. The flame of truth. A colossal iron brazier rose from the sand. The white fire danced within it, calm, pure, waiting for a sacrifice. Vander squeezed my hand. "Walk through it," he commanded softly. "Our bond, fake or not, will never break." I searched his scarred face. I looked for a sliver of doubt. I searched for a shadow of deception. I found absolutely neither. Yet a cold suspicion pierced my chest. Was he using me? Was this the final piece of his dark strategy? I stepped away from the safety of his heat. I approached the glowing brazier, closed my eyes, and stepped directly into the fire. Everything went catastrophically wrong. The pure white flame instantly turned a sickening pitch black. Agony tore through my nervous system. It was not just blistering heat. It was a vile, flesh-rending dark magic tearing at my soul. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the burning sand, screaming until my vocal cords fractured. Through the blinding pain, I looked up. Phaedra was smiling. Chapter 5. No, the sound ripped from Vander's throat. It was the devastating roar of a soul tearing in half. He did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. He threw his massive body directly into the cursed black flames. The dark magic consumed his flesh instantly, but he did not stop. He reached me. He wrapped his powerful arms around my writhing body, transforming himself into a living shield against the inferno. "Look at me," he demanded, his gravelly voice cracking. "Calliope, look at me." I could not. The pain was everywhere. It was not merely burning my skin. It was breaking an ancient iron-clad cage buried deep inside my mind. Then the final lock shattered. Memories flooded my brain with terrifying violence. They were not my memories, yet they had always been mine. War, golden blood painting a ruined sky, absolute, unrivaled power, colossal wings woven from crackling crimson energy tearing through the fragile skin of my back. "No," I whispered. This could not be real. But the visions pulled me deeper. Through the haze of a forgotten millennium, I saw him. Vander. He was not a ruthless king. He was not the terrifying monster hunting me in the dark. I saw a man on his knees in a freezing cavern, bleeding, breaking, making the ultimate choice. "I will take the curse," his ancient voice echoed in my mind. "I will become the darkness if it keeps her safe." The obsidian blade entered his chest. He sacrificed his eternity, just to cast an impenetrable seal over my mind. My breath caught in my burning throat. He was supposed to be the monster, the cruel beast who stole me from the altar, the tyrant who used me for a fake mating. Why did he bleed for me? The truth hit me much harder than the cursed fire. He did not steal me today. He saved me. He had been standing between me and the Pantheon's hunting hounds for 1,000 years. He chose to become the exact monster I feared, just so I could live. "You idiot," I whispered, hot tears burning my eyes. "You beautiful, foolish idiot." Something inside my soul snapped completely. Power surged. It was violent, ancient, and completely uncontrolled. Crimson light exploded outward in a devastating shockwave. The black flames shattered into nothingness. The entire arena trembled beneath my awakening. I was the blood wraith. But the terrifying power did not stop. It kept rising. It was wild and dangerously unstable. The sheer force of my own aura violently repelled everything in its path. Vander was violently thrown backward. My power broke his protective hold. It hurt him. No. I desperately tried to stop it. I tried to pull the crimson storm back into my veins. It was too late. My chaotic awakening left a fatal opening in his defenses. A jagged blade, dripping with divine poison, pierced directly through Vander's broad chest. Chapter 6. Vander fell. His towering body hit the frost-covered sand with a sickening, hollow thud. Pitch-black blood immediately pooled beneath his chest. Everything in the colossal arena went dead silent. "Finally," Theron said. He stepped out of the shadows. He looked calm. He looked almost relieved. He carelessly stepped over Vander's bleeding form. "As expected," Theron continued, his golden eyes wide with manic greed. "The blood wraith finally awakens. Submit to me. Calliope. Give me your power, and I may actually let you live. I said absolutely nothing. Something fundamental inside my chest had permanently changed. The suffocating grief stopped bleeding. It hardened into an icy, impenetrable diamond. It was cold. It was sharp. It was far too controlled. My ancient power answered before my human lips could. Reality fractured. I violently dragged their consciousness into my domain. Theron screamed. Phaedra screamed. Their divine minds tore apart as I locked them inside a lightless illusion. They could never escape. They clawed at their own faces, trapped in a nightmare of their own making, and still, it was not enough, because behind me, the Dark King was dying. The crimson power surged again. It was stronger now, far more unstable. I turned around, and for a terrifying second, I felt the sheer magnitude of my own wrath. If I lost control of this storm, I would destroy the entire arena. I would turn the stone to dust. I would destroy him. Fear cut through me. It was sharper and deeper than the cursed fire. Calliope. His voice was incredibly weak. It was barely a whisper over the howling wind. But it was enough. I dropped to my knees beside him. The crimson storm instantly receded. It was not gone. It was simply waiting in the shadows. I hovered my trembling hands over his ruined, ashen chest. I was completely paralyzed. I was afraid to touch him. I was terrified that my newfound power would break his fragile, fading body even further. "Stay with me," I whispered, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. In that desperate moment, the ancient legend vanished. For the first time in 1,000 years, I was not a supreme queen. I was not a divine weapon. I was just a woman, utterly terrified of losing the only man who had ever truly loved me. Chapter 7. I grabbed his fading hand. I pressed it tightly against my chest. I could feel his heartbeat slowing. It was a sluggish, dying rhythm beneath his cold, scarred skin. "You are safe now," Vander murmured. A bloody, jagged smile touched his pale lips. "My watch is ended." "Shut up," I sobbed, my tears falling freely onto his ashen cheek. "You do not get to die. You owe me an eternity." I reached for the silver dagger at my waist. It was the very same blade he had used to claim me on the altar. Without a single second of hesitation, I dragged the razor-sharp edge across my left wrist. My blood did not flow red. It glowed with a luminous, brilliant crimson light. It was the pure, untainted life force of the blood wraith. I pressed my bleeding flesh against his parted lips. "Drink," I commanded. My voice echoed with ancient, resonant magic. "Drink it all." The raw magic of my blood collided with the life oath he had forced upon my soul. The invisible chain binding us flared to life. It grew blindingly bright, a tether of pure energy connecting my heart directly to his. I poured my essence, my vitality, my forgotten divinity into his collapsing veins. A violent gasp tore through Vander's throat. His eyes snapped wide open. They no longer held the clouded glaze of death. They blazed with a terrifying dual light, the pitch black of the abyss and the feral crimson of my wraith magic. The graying ash on his skin rapidly reversed. Muscle knit back together, bone fused with a deep visceral crack. The divine poison was eradicated, purged entirely by the superior magic of my blood. He did not just heal. He evolved. The ancient curse that had bound him to the shadow shattered into a million pieces. He sat up. His broad chest heaved. He was stronger, faster, and more imposing than he had ever been in his long existence. He looked at me. There was absolutely no hesitation. He wrapped his colossal arms around me and pulled me into a bone-crushing embrace. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling my wild scent like a starving man finally given a feast. Above us, the sky trembled. The remaining gods of the Pantheon fell to their knees. The supreme rulers of the realms bowed their heads in absolute terrified submission to the new king and queen. Theron and Phaedra, their minds permanently fractured by my illusions, were chained and dragged away to the deepest lightless pits of the abyss. Weeks later, the unnatural fog parted around the dark fortress. Warm golden moonlight flooded the royal bedchamber. I lay tangled in black silk sheets. My skin was flushed, damp with a thin sheen of sweat. Vander hovered above me. His broad shoulders blocked out the moonlight. His eyes were entirely dark, swimming with unbridled feral desire. The fake mating was over. Tonight was the true ritual. His calloused hand slowly traced the curve of my hip. The touch sent a violent shiver cascading down my spine. The heat between us was a physical, suffocating force. "Are you ready, my queen?" he asked. His voice was a low, raspy purr that vibrated deep against my collarbone. "Mark me," I whispered. I arched my back, exposing the pale, unblemished skin of my throat. I threaded my fingers through his dark hair, pulling him closer. "Make me yours." With a guttural growl of pure possession, his fangs descended. He sank them deep into the crook of my neck. The sharp sting of pain instantly gave way to intense, blinding euphoria. Our souls merged entirely. We were two ancient, broken halves forging a perfect, indestructible whole. Outside the heavy oak doors, perched on a stone gargoyle, Barnaby rolled his 3 amber eyes. "Honestly," the raven muttered to himself. He used his sharp beak to polish a solid gold crown he had pried from Theron's disgraced head. A whole week of this noise. The sexual tension finally broke, and now I cannot get a single moment of peace. Disgusting. He snapped his beak shut. He tucked the stolen gold safely under his wing and settled in for the night. The abyss was finally at peace. It was ruled by a king of shadows and his queen of blood. Thank you for journeying into the shadows with us and witnessing the unbreakable bond of Vander and Calliope. If their tale of dark romance and fated destiny captured your heart, please subscribe to Elysian Ink Stories. Hit that like button, leave a comment to let us know your favorite moment, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next epic romance. Until next time, let the shadows keep you safe.